Of a major summit, the head of NATO has warned that new laws being passed in Afghanistan are making it harder to justify sending extra troops there. Critics say the new laws violate human rights because they legalise things like the rape of a wife by her husband. Yabdehub Sheffer told the BBC that our boys and girls are dying in Afghanistan in defence of universal values, while laws are passed which violate those values. Well, we cross now to Strasbourg, our Europe editor, Mark Mardell. And Mark, given the sensitive nature of this, for a NATO Secretary-General to say these things, this is strong stuff.
It is strong stuff indeed, because there's already, as you know, difficulty about getting more troops for Afghanistan. Although they may not say it in public, both the Americans and the British feel that the Europeans, although the many continental Europeans are actually in Afghanistan, that they're not doing the hard fighting, and they would like, the United States would like to see more European troops. Now the Secretary-General of NATO is saying this planned new law is making his job much more difficult. It becomes much more difficult to actually persuade people to contribute those troops.
President Obama wants more troops from countries like France, which is now a new fully part of NATO, but he's unlikely to get what he wants.
He's unlikely to get exactly what he wants. I mean, he's been pretty clever about this. He isn't actually coming here and saying, I want more troops. There were interviews with the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, yesterday on the plane as they travelled from Britain. And she was saying that we're not actually asking anything yet. But President Obama has arrived here to a very warm welcome. There's a bit of a love-in with him and President Sarkozy. And I think we can see a bit of that now. Mr. President, meet the President. The two glamorous First Ladies greeted each other like old friends in front of an enthusiastic crowd. It's been a while since the French have waved the stars and stripes with such verve, but following President Obama's every move has become something of a national hobby.
Hello! Hello! Good to see you!
This summit is a celebration. NATO is 60 years old. President Sarkozy has dismissed traditional French fears about American domination, and the French have rejoined the political part of NATO. But there's serious business too. President Obama won't be so crude as to ask for more troops for Afghanistan, but that's what he's after. In an open-air news conference, he went out of his way to welcome the return of France.
I just wanted to publicly thank and praise France once again for its outstanding leadership when it comes to Afghanistan. I've not had to drag France kicking and screaming into Afghanistan.
In Afghanistan, Americans like the British worry they do all the fighting while other European troops operate away from the action. NATO insists it's just helping the Afghan government, but plans to introduce a new law in parts of Afghanistan, legalising rape within marriage and restricting women's ability to own property, worry the Secretary-General of NATO. He told me it'll go down badly among the allies.
When I see at the moment a law threatening to come into effect, which fundamentally violates women's rights and human rights, that worries me, and that's why I'm saying that worries me greatly. That's why I'm saying.
And it worries some countries that might come forward with troops otherwise, perhaps.
How can I defend, or how can the British government defend, or the Canadian government, the Dutch government, that our boys and girls are dying there in the defence of universal values? And you see a law almost coming into effect, not yet, there's still a possibility not to sign, which fundamentally violates women's rights and general human rights.
The French president says it's good to work with an American president who wants to change the world. Few think it's going to be an easy job. Now, what the Secretary-General is saying sounds pretty simple, but it raises some profound questions, because it raises questions about the nature of diplomacy if you talk to people who have in the past been enemies, and also about how you go about the business of what NATO should be about. Is it about defeating terrorism, or is it about changing society?
Mark Mardell in Strasbourg, thank you very much. We can speak to our correspondent in Panel, who's in the Panjshir Valley in North Afghanistan. And from what the NATO Secretary-General is saying, how real are these fears of a re-Talibanization, if you like, of the country?
Well, I think certainly this law has proved very controversial. It has been done, in the view of many people, primarily for election purposes, and there remains a question about the extent to which it will actually be put into action. I think we're in a situation where the law has indeed been signed by President Karzai, but the details have not yet been released. But essentially what it involves, from the people who've been drafting it, are provisions that would allow a man to dictate when he has sex with his wife, as well as dictating when his wife would be allowed out of the home. And clearly that runs contrary to many of the things the international community, and indeed President Karzai, has publicly stated he's trying to achieve for Afghanistan.
And Ian, looking at the issue of deployment, I mean, how real is how desperate is the need for extra troops?
Well, I think again there's some controversy about what it is that extra troops will achieve. The instance is at its strongest. The military commanders, the British and the other NATO troops believe that extra troops will make a difference, primarily in allowing them to seal off this border area. But here in the north and elsewhere in Kabul, people are really worried about the ongoing military operations. They feel that insecurity has grown. They're worried about the presence of foreign troops, in particular the occurrence of civilian casualties. And many people feel that what should be happening is a process of sitting down and talking with the Taliban rather than engaging more troops to fight them.
Ian Pannell there in the Panjshir Valley, thank you. Here, the inquest into the deaths of the ruined millionaire Chris Foster and his family has heard from some of the last people to see them alive. A neighbour has said he saw pipes leading from an oil tank going into the house when he arrived at the blaze. It's believed Mr Foster killed his wife and teenage daughter before setting fire to their home. Fiona Trott is at the inquest. Fiona, good morning.
Good morning. We've just heard from another neighbour just now who said he heard gunshots in the early hours of the morning, and we know that Jill Foster was shot dead. It's likely that Kirsty was too, but Chris Foster was alive during the fire, and it's probably the